Some U.S. presidents shaped history, while others shattered confidence in leadership. For every great commander-in-chief, there's a handful who left the nation weaker, divided, or in crisis. Whether through disastrous policies, failed vision, or sheer incompetence, these 5 men earned their place in the Hall of Presidential Regret. In this video, we break down the 5 worst U.S. presidents, examining their decisions, their failures, and the lasting impact on the nation. Number 5. Herbert Hoover, the man who faced the Great Depression. Herbert Clark Hoover was the 31st President of the United States, serving from 1929 to 1933. A wealthy mining engineer before his presidency, Hoover led the Wartime Commission for Relief in Belgium and was the director of the U.S. Food Administration, followed by post-war relief of Europe. He was born August 10, 1874, West Branch, Iowa. He died October 20, 1964, at the age of 90, at the Waldorf Astoria, New York, New York. He was a member of the Republican Party. His children were Allen Hoover and Herbert Hoover, Jr. He was the 31st President of the United States. The Vice President was Charles Curtis from 1929 to 1933. His presidential term was from March 4th, 1929 to March 4, 1933. Herbert Hoover entered the White House in 1929 with a reputation as a brilliant humanitarian. He had led massive relief efforts during World War I, feeding millions in Europe. But just months into his presidency, the stock market crashed, plunging the country into the worst economic crisis in U.S. history, the Great Depression. Herbert Clark Hoover was born on August 10, 1874, in the town of West Branch, Iowa. His Quaker father, Jesse Clark Hoover, a blacksmith and farm equipment salesman, died of a heart attack when Herbert was 6 years old. 3 years later, Herbert's mother, Huldah Minthorn Hoover, died from pneumonia. Herbert Clark Hoover is the 5th worst president. He believed in self-reliance and limited government intervention. He urged businesses to keep wages steady and encouraged voluntary aid. But as unemployment soared and banks collapsed, his approach seemed out of touch. Shanty towns, known as Hoovervilles, sprang up across the country, symbolizing the suffering of millions. Desperate to restore confidence, Hoover approved public works projects, including the construction of the Hoover Dam, but it was too little, too late. By 1932, his popularity had plummeted, and he lost re-election in a landslide to Franklin D. Roosevelt. Number 4. Franklin Pierce was born November 23, 1804, in Hillsborough, New Hampshire. His birthplace is now a historical site, marking the early life of the 14th U.S. president. Franklin Pierce's presidency began with heartbreak. Just weeks before his inauguration in 1853, he and his wife Jane were traveling by train when disaster struck. Their 11-year-old son Benjamin was killed in a horrific accident, the only fatality in the crash. Jane was so distraught from the event that she did not attend the presidential inauguration, nor was she able to attend Benjamin's burial in Concord. Jane, already reluctant about Pierce's political ambitions, was devastated. She believed the tragedy was divine punishment for her husband's pursuit of power. The 4th worst president in history is Franklin Pierce. Despite his grief, Pierce took office, but his presidency quickly became defined by sectional tensions. He supported the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which allowed territories to decide whether to permit slavery. Instead of easing tensions, the act ignited violence, leading to the bloody conflict known as Bleeding Kansas. Pierce's unwavering support for pro-slavery interests alienated many in the North. His administration failed to unite the country, and by the end of his term, he was abandoned by his own party. When asked about his legacy, he reportedly said, "There's nothing left to do but get drunk." The 3rd worst president, Warren G. Harding, who never expected to be president. He was a newspaper publisher, a man who looked the part of a leader, but rarely took bold action. In 1920, he ran on a simple promise: a return to normalcy after the chaos of World War I. The American people, exhausted by war and uncertainty, embraced his message. Harding won in a landslide. At first, his presidency seemed promising. He embraced technology, supported women's rights, and pushed for economic recovery. But behind the scenes, his administration was unraveling. Harding surrounded himself with friends and political allies, many of whom saw the government as an opportunity for personal gain. The biggest scandal came in 1923, Teapot Dome. Government officials had secretly leased federal oil reserves to private companies in exchange for bribes. The corruption ran deep, and Harding, though not directly involved, had appointed the men responsible. As the scandals mounted, Harding's health declined. In the summer of 1923, he embarked on a cross-country tour, hoping to restore public confidence. But in San Francisco, he suddenly collapsed. On August 2, 1923, he died of a heart attack. His death spared him from witnessing the full fallout of his administration's corruption, but history remembers Harding not for his promises of normalcy, but for the scandals that defined his presidency. The second worst president in history. Andrew Johnson never expected to be president. He was a self-made man, a tailor-turned-politician who had climbed the ranks from mayor to senator. But when Abraham Lincoln was assassinated in April 1865, Johnson suddenly found himself leading a nation still reeling from the Civil War. At first, Johnson spoke of punishing the South, but his actions told a different story. He believed in quick restoration, allowing Confederate states to rejoin the Union without guaranteeing rights for newly freed Black Americans. He vetoed civil rights legislation, opposed the 14th Amendment, and clashed with radical Republicans who wanted stronger protections for freed slaves. His resistance led to one of the most dramatic moments in U.S. history, his impeachment. In 1868, Congress charged him with violating the Tenure of Office Act after he tried to remove Secretary of War Edwin Stanton, a key figure in Reconstruction. The House of Representatives impeached him, making Johnson the first U.S. president to face trial in the Senate. The vote was close. One senator's decision saved him from removal. But Johnson's presidency was effectively over. He finished his term isolated and powerless, unable to push his agenda forward. Years later, Johnson made an unexpected comeback, winning a seat in the U.S. Senate in 1875. But his return was short-lived. He died just months after taking office. History remembers him as the president who stood in the way of Reconstruction, a leader who fought Congress and lost. James Buchanan sat in the White House, watching the country slip through his fingers. It was December 1860, and South Carolina had just seceded from the Union. More states would follow, but Buchanan, America's 15th president, believed he had no power to stop them. Buchanan had spent decades in politics, serving as a congressman, senator, and secretary of state. He was experienced, but his presidency came at the worst possible time. The nation was bitterly divided over slavery, and Buchanan's belief in states' rights led him to avoid taking a strong stance. One of his biggest failures came in 1857, when the Supreme Court ruled on the Dred Scott case. The decision declared that Black Americans, enslaved or free, had no rights as citizens. Instead of condemning it, Buchanan quietly influenced the idea ruling, pressuring a Northern justice to side with the South. The decision fueled tensions, making war more likely. By the time Abraham Lincoln won the presidency in 1860, Buchanan was powerless. Southern states began seceding, and though he denounced their actions, he refused to use force to stop them. His inaction allowed the Confederacy to form, setting the stage for the Civil War. When Buchanan left office in March 1861, he told Lincoln, "If you are as happy entering the presidency as I am leaving it, you are a happy man." He spent his final years defending his legacy, insisting he had done everything possible to prevent war. But history remembers him as the president who stood by as the Union collapsed. Please, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. It helps the video reach more people. Thanks for watching.